So I was often taught that the graveyard shift was going at the end of the day. I think it might be going after a robotic dog and talking about the metaverse, so bear with me. I'm super conscious that we're in the solutions room, and what I want to make sure I try and provide today is a solution to a problem that is often not discussed in our industry, but one that I think we should try and tackle in a bit more detail. We heard earlier today about the challenges with DE&I and the impact that has on things like creative, media, planning, and how we operate. But it's also important how we look at our execution with technology and how we use technology to help advance our efforts around DE&I. So what I'd like to do today is do two things. The first is to challenge you to think about the current practices that you're employing and whether they are DE&I ready and enabled, and also to make a simple recommendation of what you might be able to do to improve. Now, I'm under no illusions. I'm certainly not somebody here who is probably as well qualified as many in the room to talk about DE&I, but I think it's important that we do talk about levelling the playing field. So allow me just to read just for one moment. Diversity includes all the ways in which people differ, encompassing the different characteristics that make one individual or group different from another, including identity, markers such as race, ethnicity, gender, disability, sexual orientation, religion, and more. Equality or equity is the fair treatment, access, opportunity and advancement for all people, while at the same time striving to identify and eliminate barriers that have prevented the full participation of groups. And inclusion is the act of creating environments in which any individual or group can feel welcomed, respected, supported and valued to fully participate. Some big words in there. What we're conscious of is that consumers today have significant demands of their advertisers and the prominent importance of DE&I in our industry. And it means that businesses have ultimately got two choices to make. They can either get on the bandwagon and ensure that DE&I is respected and take advantage of those opportunities and that growth, or they can put their head in the sand and be challenged by their consumers and their own customers in time. And I think I know which one we'd all rather be on. We also know that the Generation Z and the youth of today are very conscious of the impact that DE&I can have. So if you want to be future facing and thinking about your future and being able to sell more product or offer more services and solutions, then you should think about what DE&I can mean to you in your practices on online and digital buying. So what does that really mean? Let's try and put some stats to this just to give you some context. Recent studies from Kantar suggest that worldwide we're getting older. That's probably not unsurprising given the advancements we've made in technology and in health. Yet only 6% of ads show people of 65 and above. So there's already a discrepancy in terms of the people that we're trying to talk to and the representation online. Alongside that, over 1 billion people on this planet have a disability of some sort. In Britain today, 1 in 5 people have a disability. Yet only within the adverts that we see online today, less than 1% of those are represented on the TV and the websites that we look at and read every day. Also, 50% of customers and consumers agree that those brands that are offering solutions and recognising that DE&I is important to their brand strategy are actually more likely to buy services and solutions from those companies. And as the late, great Jay Chayat used to say, not enough is not good enough. We need to ask ourselves if we're doing enough in this environment to make sure that we are really making an impact. The downside to this is that 36% of customers have actually boycotted brands because of their lack of perceived DE&I awareness. That's quite a shocking statistic, and one that I'm sure nobody in this room would take any pride on. But marketers want to engage authentically. I don't think there's anybody in this room or outside this room in our industry that is intentionally going out there and trying to be ignorant or upset any particular group or individual in our marketplace. But we're not talking to people in the language they need to be talked at, and we're putting tools and technology over the top that prevents that from happening day in, day out. 2/5 of consumers that responded to the Kantar study agreed that brands are not doing enough when it comes to their advertising and their planning and buying strategies in today's world. At IES, we have a pretty big database of all of the different keywords that are used. The phrases you see on screen here today are the most blocked keywords used in the last 18 months across all of our brands and agency business that we see. Now, we can debate whether some of those words should be in a keyword list, but I think what's not for debate is if the context is not right in which those keywords are used, then we are driving bad practices and potentially blocking impressions or restricting access to advertisers and messages that we do not want to be doing. In addition, that bad practice has unintended consequences. We know that if you're blocking impressions for certain keywords without context, they're actually restricting inventory and access to premium publisher content that we know is actually brand safe. Now, this has happened because over the years, there's been a real reluctance for people to review their practices when it comes to brand safety and brand suitability. I'll give you an example. We have a number of brands that still implement the word Manchester in their keyword list due to the tragedies that happened with the Ariana Grande concert and the bombing. Now, you could argue that's not a good use of the keyword Manchester anymore, given that there was a very short period of time in which that news was being broadcast. And of course, there's lots of positive content out there around Manchester that we want to make sure we access. When we look at the top blocked URLs, the top blocked websites and pages that we see across all of our inventory that we monitor and measure, the large majority against these particular categories have actually blocked brand safe inventory because of the overzealous use of keywords on a keyword list from a brand or from an advertiser. Now, to give you some context to that, some brands are applying tens of thousands of keywords on one campaign and copying and pasting that keyword list across their other campaigns that they run. That's not a precise model, it's a restrictive model, and it's not DEI enabled. So I wanted just to bring this to life for you in a bit more detail. So here you have 3 different pages and the subsequent use of technology that was delivered. In the first, and apologies if this is slightly offensive to some people in the room, we have an impression that was blocked because there was a particular keyword in the URL that was flagged and we blocked it. Now, I'm sure many people in this room would think that's a good impression to block, considering some of the subject matter and the content that's being used. The challenge with keywords in URL is that you start to block other inventory and content that actually is brand safe and often is wanted to be targeted by brands and advertisers. Example here is a very positive message about somebody's child coming out as being gay. There are a number of brands wanting to associate themselves with that content. They're not able to do so because of the keywords that they're implying. It got blocked. And in the third example here, and this could be any particular website in our industry, the keywords are not existing in a URL because there was a series of codes and some numbers. The keyword did not fire, but there was a piece of content that wasn't particularly brand safe. Now, that's hard news, that's current affairs. We encourage hard news and current affairs, but you need page level in-text analysis to understand the page and make an informed decision about how you deliver the impression. So what I'm getting at here is that contextual capabilities are fundamental in removing bias and making sure that our media buying process is what it needs to be in 2022 and beyond. Now, forgive me for the slightly salesy slide here, but there's a lot to consider, so I wanted to try and get it across. When you're a brand or an agency, or even a publisher for that matter, there's so many things you need to consider. How well am I able to understand that page? Am I taking into consideration not just the semantics of the page, how the words fit together in the story that tells, but what's the emotion and what's the sentiment behind that page? If you can start to understand those data points, you can start to make an informed decision about positive content and negative content. You want to be able to use levers that enable you to access different types of content depending on your brand values and your brand integrity. So having choices around what you avoid and what you target is also important. It's also important to make sure that whatever you're doing is at a page level. Keywords are URL based. Exclusion lists, block lists are very blunt tools that have dramatic impact on our ability to access the right consumer. Making sure you're using page level technologies is crucial to that. And then naturally, as a buyer, as a planner, you want to be able to access that data or that inventory or that solution irrespective of how you're doing that, whether that's programmatically or direct. So what does that mean to people in this room? If you're a planner or a buyer, if you're sitting on media budget, you're a marketeer, what are the types of things you should be thinking about? Now, this could be any of our competitor slides, so I don't want it to be about IES, but there are certain levers you can start to pull to understand and to start becoming better planners and buyers. The first is understanding those basic controls that you have. Applying and understanding, not just from a brand safety perspective, but brand suitability, where you can start to use different categories to remove inventory that you're not willing to appear alongside. But you can start to add layers on top of that. There's things like topical segments. To certain brands, certain topics may not be an area they want to go in towards. So let's start building segments and offering solutions that avoid them or even target them if they so desire. There's industry standards through GARM and the work that GARM have done to make sure there's a baseline of what brand safety and suitability should be, where you can start to turn those GARM segments on and off as well through tools and technology. And finally, if you're a brand and you have particular concerns around a particular topic, or maybe even you want to avoid a competitor's use of your solutions, you can start to build out lists, you can start to build out solutions that start to provide you with that specific brand suitability strategy that you need. Now, when you actually boil it down to simplicity stakes, the reality is that the use of keywords and the overzealous use of keywords is prohibitive. It stops every consumer back in that group that I talked about at the start from accessing inventory and solutions and tools that they want to be able to see and to be able to buy. So I would urge everybody to review keyword lists. Keyword lists should be tactical use at best. They should be a very small number of keywords that enable you around a particular tragedy or disaster to be a little bit more confident about where your ads are appearing online. But you should also put trust in technology to enable that technology to the page level analysis that starts to understand the emotion and the sentiment behind those pages, and therefore open yourselves up to more inventory that's preferable to your brand. And then you can start to turn that into targeting opportunities as well. How do you start to use that information to target particular emotions, sentiments, or categories that may be of interest to the particular product that you're trying to sell? Now, to bring that to life, I've got a white-labelled example of some work we've recently done. One of our biggest advertisers was using a significantly long list of keywords. Yet, a lot of their messaging was around supporting the LGBTQ+ community, and it is imperative that they started to review their processes to make sure they were not being exclusive in their media and planning and buying. So the first thing they did was they revised that keywords and found there was a lot of keywords on there that were not discriminatory in any way, shape or fashion. The word black, for example, is never a word that should be blocked in its independency. They then started to look at the content categories that suited their brand values, and they worked out where they felt comfortable, where they felt uncomfortable, and provided different layers and levers on top of that to ensure that the technology was making a real-time decision on what to do and when to make that blocking decision or to pass that impression. And then they started to target positively to make sure they were accessing particular groups or individuals that they wanted to target with a particular message. Now, to bring that to life, when they were blocking for the first 6 months of this year, over 1,600 URLs or web pages were being blocked because of the use of their keywords. When we actually run that through our contextual solutions and engine, 94% of those pages were actually brand safe. So there's already a significant amount of impressions that are potentially being bought, sold and won that actually were brand safe but were blocked because of the use of the keyword. Where they are now is in a position where 100% of their ads are being served. They're being served to communities, into individuals, into groups that they want to be targeting, and they now feel like they're following the brand values that they've been trying to push into market for a significant amount of time. So when I started this presentation, I talked about having solutions. I think it's really important that whatever you do in your planning and buying process, we think about how things like tools and technology can offer small wins to become more inclusive and more diverse. My name's Paul. If you've got any questions, I'm around for the rest of the afternoon, and thank you.